I do.
Too many characters.
I know. So confusing to
I
read.
can't hear you. Just a second. I'm just waiting. Perfect. Okay, I can hear you. And I think I lost you. Oh, there.
It's Cheetah.
I know. It's always Jada. Ooh, thank you for doing that.
No problem.
Just gonna have this off to the side. Jada says she's getting denied.
Oh.
Every time. There's some problem.
I know. How did she not see it? I don't know how to do it.
Maybe you can send her another link. I think one time I had to take 2 links. Oh, wait. No, that was you.
Sorry. I'm like trying to figure out. Okay.
Okay.
Send her another. I can do that. Okay, I sent her another link. Oh, she says she has no email. Even on your phone? How do I invite her?
So at the top of the page, if you move your mouse to the top, you know where it has the turn camera off and all that, it should have one that you can share.
Yeah. So I did that by me,
Oh,
and she's saying she has like, I don't know if she means like she didn't get it or if she doesn't have access to email right now. Says she didn't get it. Their email. Okay, I just sent it to her again, and then I sent it to another email that she gave me. So we shall see. That's to another email that she gave me.
Hi, Jada.
Yes.
There we go.
I am so sorry this happens every week.
Okay.
Oh my
Hi,
God.
Jada.
Yes. I am so sorry this happens. Oh shit. Okay, I'm ready to this over with.
Cool. We're all here.
Where'd you guys go?
Why you are in Oregon?
Great question. My internship randomly flew me here, like last minute, but I'm only here for like a couple days. But they gave me a cool room. I feel so important.
Nice.
It's no food, so I'm starving. So, Potiki.
Yeah.
Okay. We got the questions on the side, so let me check the time real quick. 7:09. So we need to finish at 7:39. Okie doke. So let's do this thing. Okay, so how does time function in the book? And why did the author choose to use time in this way? So I noticed that with time, it sometimes moved really quickly, like it went through like a bunch of years and you didn't even notice. And sometimes it was like a day for like a chapter and a half. So I thought that was really interesting. So yeah, and they go kind of back and forth through time. Like he starts talking about the past, and then he talks about the present, and then he talks about the possible future, and it just bounces all around. So I think the reason why she chose to do it that way, because I think that's kind of how stories work. So like when you're telling a story, sometimes time moves really quickly, or or when you're remembering something, it seems like time moves fast, and then in a story it's kind of endless time. It's like everything kind of comes together. So I think that she kind of described the culture, and she describes stories in this way. And there was one quote that I saw that kind of illustrated that, and it was said, good had followed what's not good on the circle of our days. Like their days were kind of like a circle. Like they'd have something bad happen, and they'd have something good, and then bad and good and everything, and it was a circle instead of like a line that you usually see time being in. It was like in this circle. So, and what political or social cultural implications can be seen in her use of time? I think it really just showed how distant the people were from the average culture. Like the average people saw time, and they saw space as this and this and this, and they were always talking about progress and advancing and moving forward. But the people saw it as an endless thing that always was and always will be. And it showed just how different the culture was, because it was instead of focusing, oh, we need to advance and move forward, they were happy with living their life just as their ancestors did, and having their children live the life just the same. They were proud of that because that's the circle that they believed in. So I thought that was cool.
Yeah, I got pretty much like the same thing. Like you said, like the time kind of, it's kind of like hard to read at times because it's like it would move around, and you're like, I don't know where I'm at. Like
Yeah.
it's like a bunch of people are, because it shows all these different perspectives. It shows them all like kind of like telling the story in their way. So some of them, like you'll notice, have like a lot of detail, or they go into it like over like a short amount of time. They make it into like this long story,
Mhm.
or like it'll be like kind of a lot of stuff, but they make it into, I don't know, like this really short story. So that was something I noticed too. And I also noticed that there's like, similarly with how you said like they would like they wouldn't like take the time to like go over everything. Like for example, when Toko dies, like it's literally like the, because it's like that's like the first part of like the third part of the book. But and it's literally like the, in the second part, like everything's good, like they just rescued Manu and stuff. And then literally the third part, they're just like, yeah, so Toko died. And you're like, oh my god,
What?
you go into like those events at all, you know?
Mhm.
So yeah, I kind of agree. And I think, like you said, like that kind of plays into like the culture, because like Polynesian culture too is all about like, before people came and like colonized, like it was all about like oral stories.
Mm.
And so like this book is kind of like how they would have told this story, because it's like a lot of different people's views, and a lot of like they skip over parts, they focus on parts that they think is important. Whereas like you're saying, like a typical like Western story, it's like the time would kind of be like more of a line rather
Mhm.
than kind of like this jumble. So yeah.
So
Yeah.
there.
Fine, you
So
can
there's lots of like telling stories about the history, and I think people just like an old man telling yeah, young people about the history, and the young people can learn the knowledge and wisdom from the history, and also from the book you can see that their culture is getting invaded by some new era. So it's also like reflected uh, the old times by the old story. So yeah.
I agree. And it also provides like different perspectives because like there would be multiple chapters on kind of like the same event, right? So I think that's cool because like you guys could tell me like a really cool story, but then when I go and say it, it's completely different, right? So we might miss like certain details. So it's cool because we get like more of that story. And then honestly, I was looking online like trying to figure out why she was writing like this, and a lot of people compared it to patchwork. And I thought that was cool because like even though it makes like no sense in the end, all that patchwork comes together to make like a really pretty quilt awesome story.
That's a cool way to look at it.
Yeah, yeah. That sounds pretty good. I had a thought. What was my thought? No, I noticed also that in the story, the way that they would tell things, it kind of seemed to become a little bit like myth. Like when they were talking about the guy that died, and they said that he was the size of a mountain, and then they said, well, he wasn't really the size of a mountain. I'm sure that he was just a really fat guy, and but then they said, well, he did go on the mountain sometimes, and and I love how like it went from like this everyday story, like, oh, this guy that was really big died, to this guy that was the size of a mountain and had this great history and everything. I thought that was kind of a cool way that they told stories. So yeah. So the next question is, what relationship do the characters have with the land, and why? So the characters, they're very attached to the land. So the land is like they said, without it, then they're just kind of floating around. The land keeps them like keeps. I don't know how well they describe, but it's kind of, it keeps their souls together, and I can't really describe it other than like with your feet on the ground type of thing. So they, when other people would come by and say, "Hey, can you sell it? Or we'll give you a bunch of money. Oh, you can live over here," and they provided all these options that would seem like not terrible options, but to them it wouldn't mean anything because their land was where they had their stories and their histories and their past, and it was a part of them, and without it, they lose part of themselves and their identity. So I thought that was interesting. So, and they have that, why I think they have that connection with the land because they've been living kind of in the same place for a long period of time. Like in the West, we move around from place to place and we never stay for too long. But they've been living in the same place for like hundreds of years. And so that place and the house that they built had all of their ancestors and everything. So it had so much history that it wouldn't be them without being with the land, and all of their stories are part of the land that they know. So I think that's why. And what political and social culture that can be seen. So they talk a little bit about poverty, and they say, yeah, poverty is not a good word. Poverty is destructive too, but we did not have real poverty on page 108. So to the rest of the world, without having a normal job and making a lot of money, they were in poverty because they kind of lived from day to day. But because of their connection with the land, it wasn't poverty. It was them living kind of their best life, being one with the earth. And when there's a problem, they don't mind going a bit hungry because they know that it's kind of part of a cycle and things will get better. So yeah.
Yeah, I like that. Yeah, I kind of like I said the same thing. Like the role of the land, like it's really important for them. They have kind of like the same like if we take care of the land will take care of us. Like Hemi shows, Hemi, I don't know. He shows that like a lot in the book because like when he loses his job, it's just like "So, all good. Like we've got everything that we need here." Um, so yeah, and I think that's kind of cool because, like you said, like that's not really what like the Western view of land is. It's just kind of like land. We live on it, like we don't really treasure it as much and we don't see it as like it doesn't, like for Western people, we're like, yeah, frick yes, we get to live in these nice newer places.
Mhm.
Like that's amazing, we don't care. But to them it's like you don't care that we lived in crappy houses before or what they described as like crappy houses. Like
Mhm.
they're like those houses were important to us because they were like passed down for generations and they had a lot of history in them and they had like the sacred. I'm not even gonna try to pronounce some of these things, but like the sacred like, meeting place for them. Um, so it's also kind of like the value that they put on the land as they stay there. Um, and so one of the like kind of looking at like the political and sociocultural implications, kind of going with like how people's relationship with the land was. I kind of like noticed how, like, for example, when Reuben was like, is that his name? Reuben?
Yeah, yeah.
Reuben? Yeah, yep, him. And when he was like, why don't we live on land anymore? Like most of his elders, who were people who like actually lived there and stuff, they were like, well, the government took it, and like, like they had started kind of like believing the government and were kind of on the government's side. Like, they just didn't want to fight it. And the same goes for like in the end of the book when um there's this part where Tangi Moana, like she goes and she like it's after Toko dies and she's just like, you've like killed my brother. She doesn't just yell at them for that, like all the carpenters and stuff that are working. She says, you bled the land, she shouted, and those who had been about to move remained, and you almost destroyed the sacred place in a time of rain. You fired our first house, and now you've killed our brother. And then, like after they're, and that's on page 160, and after they're like making all these excuses, they're like, we just need jobs, like sorry. But a lot of those people were like, they were like of the same ethnicity and stuff, so it should have been important to them, but they had kind of been like brainwashed to not think it was as important.
Mhm.
And so that kind of like to me stood out just because like it shows how like the land is kind of representative. It's like such a big part of their culture that it kind of represents their culture, and it shows how like some people were like really wanted to hang on to it and really wanted to make sure that it like is perpetuated into the future. And like some other people were like, well, like all these other cultures that are kind of coming in and infringing on us, like they have some good ideas too, and like like they were willing to give it up more. So that was a long thought, but yes,
Good. I
thank you.
so totally agree with you.
Okay, good.
So there's a quote in page 18. Yet, because of being a nothing, a natural place, not land, not sea, there is freedom on the shore and rest. This is said by Roman time. Roman time. Yeah,
Yeah.
Roman time.
Mm-hmm.
And so you can see that they said this is his perspective of growing up in this land, and it seems like they is he's enjoy being there, and he really see that his culture is important. So when other culture come in, the people live there, they want to protect their land. So it's not nothing. If it's nothing, they won't protect their land. Yes.
Good talk.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Oh, cool. Why did I do that? So I wrote that, the land, the land is special. The land is special and sacred to the Maori tribes because, like we talked about, it's not something that can be bought with money because the people, they believe and they have stories that they were brought over to that island, to that land on the backs of whales. So that land is literally a gift to like start their family so that they could cultivate the land to grow and to flourish. So like it being sacred is just so much more than like having their burial sites or their like their churches or their buildings and all that stuff. It goes so much deeper because in that land that's where they started, and in the soil that's where like their souls and the spirits and their ancestors are. So for like dumb foreigners to come and say like we'll buy it to build malls, that's really messed up because they don't understand the depth and significance of like your soul running through the soil. Yeah.
Nice.
I like
I can see you later.
I know, we just see your forehead.
Yeah,
It's kind of nice though.
it's a big forehead.
It's a private.
Okay. So what messages do you find in the novel? And what role does folklore have in communicating these messages? So the message that I found in the novel, talked about the importance of stories for everyday life. So it's like you could think of stories as something that, like, especially myths and those types of things, they were just for the past and people relied it more on the past. But it doesn't really apply to everyday life now. But in the book, they talked about how their stories were continually forming and continually making, and they'd go and they'd reference past stories so that they could understand what was going on now. It was there's one that said, it was then listening to Granny and watching her move about the Warakai that I really understood her stories. And this is when Toko's talking about how like his grandmother had had a really difficult life and she'd seen a lot of terrible things happen during her life. But the stories brought balance to all the hardship because it showed that after every hard thing, there came something that made it worth it. So she was able to keep living and keep moving on. And when other people had a really hard time and went through something that was really difficult, she was able to teach them how to move on through the stories that she would tell. So I thought that was a good message that was in the novel. And yeah, and they also talked, I thought another good message that was in the novel is kind of like going back to the roots, because the people that went away from their roots, they were always just focused on their jobs and things like that, and they would always be making excuses, kind of like Jada said. But the people that stayed on the land, they were the ones that kept the sacred places sacred. They were the ones that were able to rely on each other, and they always were able to make it through hard times. So yeah, so I thought that was interesting. So those are some themes.
Nice. Yeah, those are, I liked hearing. And just to add to that, a couple of the messages that like stuck out to me was like the importance of like keeping in perspective what is important. So like I said before, like Hemi, that's gonna be his name. Hemi, I don't know. Hemi. He, is like a good example of like he had that perspective like of family is all that we need, like we have like our culture, we've got the land, like we're good kind of thing. Like the only things that we really need. Um, so that was the one theme that kind of stuck out to me. Because like as you can see, like the characters that don't like rely, I wouldn't say rely, the ones that don't kind of have that focus, like even if they're like smaller characters in the book, like you can see that it changes their priorities and it changes their lives a lot, and it also changes their actions. So um and then another message that I kind of noticed is like the importance of um like fighting back when things are wrong, or the importance of like okay, I'm just gonna read the quote and then I'll like formulate that thought better. But the quote's on page 65 and it says, "It was funny how people saw each other, funny how you came to see yourself in the mold that others put you in, and how you began not to believe in yourself. You began to believe that you should hide away in the old seaweed like a sand flea, and that all you could do undisturbed was hop about and hope you wouldn't get stood on. But of course, you did get stood on." So that was just kind of like um that kind of showed to me, and I thought it was like prevalent throughout the book, was like how, you know, like people are always going to come in and try to kind of like knock down your culture, knock down your family, even like Mary getting pregnant in like the beginning. Like people are always going to come in and do stuff that's like not cool, but it's kind of like up to you on whether you allow that to happen or like how you deal with it, like how you react to things. Because even their reaction, like they could have reacted in a lot of different ways, but they just like took the baby like and was like, okay, it's our child now, you know, like we'll raise him as our own. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. And I I found this book storytelling is really powerful because storytelling can get people more involved their emotion. And there's a story about Jenny and she lost her husband and she almost left her children like really hungry and cold. And there's a quote in 140, and I saw that pain was so ordinary and sorrow was so ordinary that they were close, so close to being almost joined. So you can tell that people, when people tell you this story, you can feel that, oh, this woman is so so sad, and she has a sad life. So and yeah, storytelling is a really powerful tool to let people understand your experience and how you're feeling is. Hi, Jada. Your turn.
Well, guys, to keep it short, because I'm tired, the themes I picked were, like you guys said, keeping storytelling alive. Because if you forget that, you forget your past, and then you forget who you are. And the other one I saw was about survival, specifically with, like, are they called indigenous people or you just call them natives? Whatever. Maori people. Yeah, it's just about them surviving and then like them using those stories to get strength. Yeah.
Yeah,
Nice.
good job, Jada.
Thank you.
Perfect.
Thesis, let's go. Thesis.
Yeah, thesis. Okay. So my thesis was in Potiki. Patricia Grace uses repetition and foreshadowing to illustrate the importance of stories in everyday life. I think I already used some quotes. Oh, the stories change. There is a story of water, but there is also a story of colors and a story of stars, and that's on page 115. And I think I already said everything else.
Nice. My thesis was that in Potiki, Patricia Grace uses dialogue, point of view, and personification to show that we get to choose the stories that define us. And yeah, I already used quotes, but my thesis.
Okay, my thesis is in Potiki. Storytelling and cultural history can teach people fighting for what is right and knowing what is right. That's it.
Nice.
That's deep. Love that. Hey, Patricia Grace's novel, Potiki, portrays the importance of the Maori people passing their culture through oral storytelling by using foreshadowing, point of view, and another literary device that I have not determined at this point.
That sounds awesome, guys. Perfect.
Yeah.
Okay, so it's your turn to write
Yep.
the thing. So
Yes.
we'll send you our thesis.
And your quotes, yeah, that too. And if you'll
And-
send me the link as well, I'll get that done.
Yep. Yeah, is there
Is that our
anything-
last book?
Yeah, it
Yeah.
is.
Yay!
But now we have
We have like a huge paper.
Yeah, research paper.
so we'll have to write 2 pages.
Yeah.
Yeah, 2 books.
Mm.
Double space.
Yes.
Oh,
With Emily. Yes.
Kiddo. Well, I gotta go, but see you guys. Thanks.
See ya.
yeah.
Bye.